commander got up off the debris-filled floor and said, "I have but one last duty to perform." He walked over to the control panel, and Newton and his crew beamed aboard their ship. The commander pulled the destructor cord, activating the bomb. The ship flared up, and that was the end of the commander and his ship. The Lava Planet is this next story. It's another takeoff on Star Trek. Newton, I'm getting strange readings on my sensors from that planet over there. It seems to be so strong that we can pick it up and put it on the viewing screen, said Sonia. You're kidding. How could any life on a planet like that? How could there be any life on a planet like that? Oh, how could there be any life on that planet? Well, how can there be any life on that planet like that? That's a lava planet. But if it will show up on the viewing screen, then put it on the air, demanded Newton. Sonia pressed a couple of buttons up to the viewing screen. When the viewing screen came in, a figure that appeared to be human was sitting in a throne. Newton and his crew didn't know who it was, but when the man said, "My fellow mutant, let me make one thing perfectly clear. I am your former Earth President, Richard M. Nixon." Newton stood up out of his throne and said with surprise, "Was there a president called Nixon?" "Yes, Newton, he lived over 200 years ago, and he was a president. A bad president," said Sonia. "What did he do?" "He was in the Watergate scandal." "Gee, I thought when I studied U.S. history, Nixon was in variety shows and always shook his cheeks and stuff like that," said Newton. "Those were just impersonators." Nixon broke in and said, "You don't mind if I board your ship, do you?" Newton thought for a while and said, "Okay," and then went to the transporter room to beam Nixon up. Just as they were about to beam Nixon up, Shirley said, "Newton, I just saw something very strange on my sensors, like a moving rock, down on the lava planet. Like it was a living thing. Maybe a steam cloud." "Maybe a steam cloud? I guess so," said Shirley, confused. Then they beamed Nixon up. Newton was dressed in a fancy spacesuit. Shirley was wearing a fancy United States uniform. Sonia was wearing a Russian uniform. And Obakova was wearing the golden cape of Kumba. The Star-Spangled Banner played when Nixon came aboard. Sonia blew a whistle, usually heard on old sea ships when the music stopped. Nixon said, "I haven't felt so good and welcome since I became president." That was before Watergate. Then he asked, "Where is the band that I heard the music from?" Newton answered with, "This is the 23rd century. All we have now are tapes and records." And after Newton said that, they all walked down the hallway to the bridge. Newton asked, "Mr. Nixon, how come you knew that I was a mutant, but you didn't know my name?" "Because the people on the planet know you, but they said your name was Mutant to me, so I said Mutant." "There are people living down there?" "That is correct." "You're not pulling another Watergate lie out of me, are you?" Are you?" Newton asked. "I'm not a crook," shouted Nixon. An hour later, and after Newton showed Nixon around the ship, all that kind of stuff, Nixon said, "I would like to beam down on that planet with you." "That's a lava planet," said a concerned Newton. "And I'm still wondering why you were able to live on it, and also, what in the world's... why were you on it in the first place?" "If you beam down, you will be told why I was on it. The only thing that I can remember about being on the planet was talking to you. It's really strange. First I was on Earth, and now 300 years in the future." It's as confusing as being President of the United States. Newton asked, I, eh, I'm, uh, are we, okay, Newton asked, and I just, okay, am I just beaming down with you? No, I would like to bring, I'd like you to bring Obakoba with us. Because down there is a leader of his planet down there too. Newton, Obakoba, and President Nixon got up out of the transporter plates, to the transporter plates. Sonia said, Newton, I hope that continent of land that suddenly appeared on the lava planet is real, because if it isn't, there won't be enough time to bring you back out of the lava. You'll be dead men. Newton looked at Nixon and said to himself, boy, I'm really taking a big gamble trusting this man. Then Sonia beamed them down. Sonia beamed them down. Newton, Obakoba, and Nixon found themselves down on the planet. The planet had a red atmosphere, and the continent was rocky with a few trees here and there. Newton could see the lava sea out in the distance, and there was a smell of sulfur in the air. Apparently they were on an island surrounded by lava. Newton said, boy, this sure is a populated place. Mr. Nixon broke in, saying, you think I'm just pulling another prank? Well, let me tell you something. I am Richard M. Nixon. Right after Nixon said that, a voice said, coming behind them, just like I appear to be. They all looked around and saw a big black figure dressed in fancy robes. He appeared to be a Negroid humanoid. Negroid humanoid. Zirakumba, said Obakoba with excitement. Newton asked, you know this man, Obakoba? Yes, Zirakumba was the father of our planet Kumba. He was a very wise leader. Zirakumba walked up to Obakoba, sticking out his thumbs, and said, Obakoba, live well and populate. Live well and populate also, Zirakumba. Newton suddenly noticed that everybody was missing their hand phasers, and there was an interference on the communicator, so they couldn't call Mutania. What's going on here, Mr. Nixon? Did you take the phasers and mess up the communicators? I'm not a crook. I'm not a crook, shouted Nixon angrily. Suddenly there was a gaseous sound, and the sound of moving rock. Newton looked around and saw a big moving rock man that seemed to be 8 feet tall and sitting in one place. It looked like a pile of fresh manure in the North Pole, because steam was rising up out of it. Newton walked up to it, and it said, you are Newton, the king of Mutania. Since you have been down here, you will be involved in one of our experiments. Like what kind of experiment? Asked Newton. The experiment of good and evil. Well, of sort of good. To see which is the stronger, a bad guy or a good guy, or a nice guy. I'm going to call my ship, said Newton quickly, hoping to leave the loony lava planet. You can't leave or communicate with your ship until the experiment is over. And since you can't right now, your ship's crew will be able to see your moves by looking at their viewing screen. And on Mutania, Sonia and Shirley are watching Newton down on the planet. What in heaven's name is this? Wondered Shirley with fear. Heaven's got little to do with this, said Sonia. And down on the planet, the Rockman said, "You have 4 hours to defeat your attackers, or your ship will be destroyed. If you win, they... then you can go free." Nixon looked at President Nixon and shouted, "Well, here's another fine mess you've gotten us into." Then he shouted at the Rockman, "Listen here, you big overgrown pile of human waste. I don't want any part of this stinking experiment." "Then suffer the consequences," said the Rockman as it clicked its crab pincher like fingers, and 3 people walked out behind a giant boulder, followed by a floating robot computer that Newton knew very well. The Rockman said, "The names of your opponents are number 1, Tan, a Klingon escapee from the Earth Federation. Tan lived in the past and was very clever when he killed the planet's race with bacteria. The second is Tamgar, the Viking, who lived on Earth centuries ago. He was known to chop off people's heads and to have molested their brains. The third is Pancho Villa, a Mexican bandit from Earth. And the last is Computer Hal, a computer known and programmed to eat mutants. You will all start your attack now." The Rockman quit talking. Pancho Villa walked up to Newton and said, "Hey, amigo, you know about me, but I don't like that." "You mean you're not a cruel, ruthless, stupid, tequila-drinking Mexican who tried to invade the United States?" Newton asked. "History does have a tendency to exaggerate the truth, but I'm not like that. You see, senor, I want to get out of here as much as you do. It's the overgrown mierda that's keeping us here, that's all." And as Pancho Villa was talking to Newton, his gang was getting ready to attack them. Computer Hal sneaking around to eat Newton, making Newton's crew very upset and nervous as they watched on the viewing screen. Suddenly, Newton heard Obakoba shout, Look out, Nixon! Tamgar the Viking's gonna throw a rock on your head." Newton and all of his side began fighting the bad guys. Newton was fighting with Computer Hal. Obakoba was fighting with Tamgar. Zirakumba was fighting with Tan. And Nixon was punching out Pancho Villa. Newton sent Computer Hal crashing up against the rocks, then threw a giant boulder on it. The computer flew off, followed by Pancho Villa. After that, they all ran off. Nixon said happily, "What a joy it is that I can still wrestle." An hour later, and Newton and his gang were making weapons to defeat the bad guys. Zirakumba said, "Newton, I won't kill. I am not a violent man." "You'll have to be, Zirakumba. We're fighting for our lives and my ship." Zirakumba said, "Millenniums ago, Kumbas were a very savage race, but we overcame our violence with words and reason. I think we can talk our enemies out of violence." Newton thought for a while and said, "Okay, Zirakumba. If you think you can persuade them, then do it." Zirakumba left Newton's base and began walking over to the bad guy's place. Newton walked up to Obakoba and said, "Your Zirakumba's a brave Kumba." "Yes, he is. He was known as the peacemaker of the planet Kumba. He hated violence and loved reason and ideas. He hated violent sports like boxing and tennis. He was very logical." After Obakoba said that, Nixon walked up to Newton and asked, "Do you drink?" "Do you drink?" "Occasionally. Why?" "You remind me of President Ford," said Nixon, shaking his jowls. "Why, thanks, Nixon. But wait a minute, I only drink water." Newton walked up to Obakoba and said, "Did the Kumbas invent a kind of boomerang?" "Yes," agreed Obakoba. "And Mr. Nixon, didn't you have a slingshot as a boy?" "Indeed, I did." It was fun breaking the neighbor's windows and glasses with it, too. And at the bad guy's place. Stay right there, nigger, shouted Computer. Stay right there, nigger. Let's see. How did... And at the bad guy's place. Stay right there, nigger, shouted Computer Hal. I've come in peace. I've come in peace and no weapons. My group is back at the base. I've come here to help you because I'm a man of peace and good fortune. Computer Hal asked, how do I know that you that you may be talking to us while your friends are sneaking around getting ready to clobber us on the head? And while Zirakumba was giving him a lesson in brotherhood and goodness and niceness, Computer Hal was getting ready to bat Zirakumba over the head. And back at Newton's fortress, Newton said, I respect Zirakumba for what he is doing. I think he just might do something. Then suddenly Newton and his gang heard a yell of pain followed by a cry. Oba, hit me, Oba. Ah. Oba, hit me. Newton and Nixon all got excited, kind of shaking up Obacoba. Pancho Villa shouted out in the distance, Mi amigos, you better come quick. Your friend seems to be hurt. Then Tando, the Klingon, shouted, yes, he seems to have stubbed his little toe when he fluttered into our camp like a pretty butterfly. Then they all heard, help me, Oba, ah! Newton shouted, we've got to do something. Obacoba said calmly, a Kumba wouldn't cry out like so. A Kumba wouldn't cry out so. A Kumba wouldn't cry out so. I don't care if he is a Kumba. He's in pain, and we need to get him. Ah, Oba, help me! Shouted the voice again. Obacoba said, "That's not Zirakumba. They're just saying that to get us out and open." President Nixon said, "I've got an idea. I've got an idea." Newton looked a little glum and said, "I know about your ideas, and that Watergate one was not a very good one." Mr. Nixon said as he was going to have Nixon said that he was going to have Newton and Obacoba distract the bad guys while he would sneak around and free Zirakumba. Free Zirakumba. Okay, what? And free Zirakumba. Where am I now? Newton said, "Mr. Nixon, this just might be the first time you'll be right, since you're going to sneak and do something you're good at." And they tried President Nixon's plan. Obacoba and Newton picked up their weapons and ran to get the bad guys. They started throwing spears and rocks at them to distract them, while Nixon snuck around and freed Zirakumba. And as Newton and Obacoba did, Nixon crept down into the bad guys' hideout and saw Zirakumba tied up in a sitting position down by a pole. Nixon snuck down by him and started untying the ropes. And as he untied, he said, "My fellow Zirakumba." He said, "My fellow Zirakumba, let me make one thing perfectly clear. I'm going to do something good once and free a man." Nixon said as he shook his jowls and shifted his eyes quickly from side to side. But right as he was done untying Zirakumba, Zirakumba fell to the side, dead. He had been dead for quite some time. Suddenly Nixon heard some laughter behind him, and Pancho Villa said to Tan the Klingon, "Now can you make a cry like Nixon?" Tan started shaking his cheeks and shifting his eyes, and then said, "Help me, Newton." Tan raised his hands and did the peace sign, like Nixon, and shouted with a voice just like Nixon, "Help me, Newton." A few minutes passed, and Nixon walked out behind two gigantic boulders with his arms in back of him. Newton and Obacoba quit fighting. Nixon gasped out, "Newton, stay back." He then fell dead on his face with a spear sticking out of his back. Now it was just 2 against 4. Newton was losing. Suddenly the 4 bad guys came out and began fighting with Newton and Obacoba. Newton ran up to Tan the Klingon and punched him 5 times in the face, knocking him up against a rock wall. Then Newton leaped off the ground and kicked him up against the rock wall with his might, shattering his head. Newton then was wrestling around with the Viking on the ground while Obacoba fought Villa. Newton knocked out the Viking with a bash on the head, then flipped him 60 feet through the air. The Viking landed on some rocks. It was now 2 versus 2. Newton was now fighting with computer Hal. Obacoba killed Pancho Villa by tripping him backwards on his stiletto knife. Newton destroyed computer Hal by trapping it beat up against a rock wall and punching its wires and gadgets out. And after that, Newton had won. The Rockman freed Newton's ship and said, "You are the victors. It proves that good is stronger than bad. It was very interesting experiment. It was a very interesting experiment and match." Newton shouted to the Rockman, "This isn't the first time you did this, remember? I was put through this very same experiment before, and I've heard that you have done this to other ship captains who have landed on this planet. So I think I will stop it like the time I stopped the other Rockman." Newton started running to the Rockman. The Rockman tried to turn into a rock again, but it was too late. Newton swung up and knocked the Rockman's block off. He and Obacoba then left the planet before they tried to put them in some more crazy experiments. And I think that's all I'll read for now. I'm really getting tired of reading for today. Hello there. Just a minute. Okay. Alright, this is Newton and the NFC Empire, Part 1. "Keep it steady, my crew, and look out for avenging Federation ships," said Newton. Sonia asked, "Newton, why are you going to visit Earth again? You know how much they hate you." "I know, Sonia, but this is my original home. The planet Earth is where I was born on. If they want to attack me and commit suicide, then that's their problem. I know they're my enemies now, but still I want to see how Earth is doing. I hear it has a population of 11 million now." Mutiny shot past Saturn, then Jupiter, Mars, and seconds later was orbiting Earth. "Well, Newton, here we are, Earth," said Sonia, looking at the viewing screen that was showing the Earth below it. Newton stood up out of his throne and said with a smile on his face, "Great. I haven't seen this planet in over 2 years or more. And there doesn't seem to be a spaceship or Federation starship in sight." Suddenly, Newton became out of sight. He disappeared right in front of his crew's faces. "Newton!" his crew yelled when he vanished. "He's gone, just like that," shouted Oak. He's gone, just like that, shouted Obakobo with confusion. And in the ocean of Earth, the Pacific Ocean, Newton found himself out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with not a bit of land in sight. Newton swam a little and looked at the sun go down through the clouds and turn the sea black as it got dark. Newton didn't know what was going on. Apparently the people of Earth beamed him off the bridge of his ship and put him down into the sea with some new and improved transporter that could transport in a flash of an eye. Newton noticed that something was keeping him from flying. Every time he tried to fly out of the sea, some kind of wave would knock him out of the air and into the water again. Newton just waited around in the water for the ship to scan for him, to beam him back up. But the people of Earth were the cause of Newton's disappearance, and they blocked out Mutinia's tracking scan with a new kind of blocker that kept his crew from finding him. What's taking them so long? Newton asked himself. Suddenly Newton noticed that the sea around him was getting waves in it. Newton was kind of scared because he didn't know what was taking place down below him in the murky depths. Suddenly, as it got darker, Newton saw a bright light moving under the sea like a gigantic yellow glowing sea monster eye. It caused an undertow and started pulling Newton down under the water. But Newton could fight it, and it quit. Suddenly the waves out in the distance got wild, and something dark began to rise up out of the sea. It was that thing that had the light on it, and it was dark and frightening to Newton. The thing was a giant submarine with a shape like a big oil. In the shape... Oh, with a shape like a big... In the shape of a big oil carrier, that's what it should be. Newton watched its surface, and with tons of water pouring over its sides. Suddenly the thing began to turn and face Newton. Newton started getting ready to swim away from it. The submarine was beginning to open its mouth and sail towards Newton. Newton started swimming off. The monster-sized ship was gaining speed. Newton was traveling at 30 miles per hour. And the thing was still catching up. Newton swam his hardest, up to 50 miles per hour, and started beating the submarine. But the sub used every bit of its energy until Newton was in its mouth. The ship closed its jaws and Newton was its prisoner. Newton found himself in a big, barren cavern-like room, closed with water all around him. There were lights on the ceiling of the ship, and balconies of people. And balconies for people to walk on. Suddenly, soldiers started running into the room. There were about 500 of the 500 of them. They all started. They all lined up on the balcony and saluted Newton, who was floating around in the water. The ruler of the earth said, "Newton, you are our prisoner, and my slave now. But you can get back your freedom if you do